All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm Melissa Lederer. I'm the Chief Experience Officer of mHUB. We're excited to have you here this evening for this fireside chat that we've been trying to get on the books for a little while now with Kristi Ross and Glen Tullman, sponsored by Bank of America. This talk was originally, as I said, scheduled in March on our annual demo day. And needless to say, we've postponed it a few times in the hopes that at some point we'd be able to get everyone back together live. Things didn't work out quite as we planned, so we've decided to move forward and do it virtually because this is such a great opportunity, and we really didn't want to miss you getting to hear from Glen and Kristi today. So here we are, virtual, and hopefully we'll make it through with very few technical difficulties. I am thrilled to welcome Glen and Kristi. Glen is a serial entrepreneur, as you know, whose thesis for building businesses and investing has been centered around empowering the informed, connected health consumer. You all must know of the meteoric rise, really, of Livongo over the last several years, 6 years, I think I just heard. And I'm sure that Glen will have a lot to talk about this evening. I think it's important more than ever as we think about coming into this pandemic and what it's been like over the last 6 months and recognizing the gaps and the opportunities for innovation in healthcare and really disruption. From mHUB's perspective, that's really at the intersection of hardware and software. And we will be looking to hear from Glen tonight with his ideas on innovation, that disruption, entrepreneurship, and how he thinks about investing and opportunities going forward. Glen is going to be interviewed by Kristi Ross. Kristi is a figurehead in Chicago's investment, tech, and business communities. She's CEO and president of Tastytrade, one of the most watched online financial networks. She's co-host of Bootstrapping in America. She co-founded Doe, a virtual front-end technology platform. Kristi's been recognized everywhere, and I'm sure you guys have seen her. Really, just so involved in our community here. She's been honored by ITA, City Lights as a prominent tech woman, the Moxie Awards, Women in Tech, Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year, Crane's Tech 50. I could go on and on. She's active on lots of boards and organizations. I am fortunate to get to work with her on the marketing committee of the Economic Club. And this is just a thrilling opportunity to bring you both here on behalf of mHUB. So thank you both. I will turn it over to Kristi, and we'll get ready for a great conversation. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Melissa. Really appreciate it. Great to be here. So I have been lucky enough to actually interview Glen a few times over the past couple of years on our show, Bootstrapping in America, and hear about Livongo's evolution and incredible growth, and also hear about other companies he's founded and co-founded, from solar energy to digital education, and of course, healthcare and innovation in medical devices. Glen is a highly successful, insightful serial entrepreneur, investor, philanthropist. Like literally, he checks all the boxes, okay? But he's also a leader that has incredible empathy and drive to make this world a better place through innovation. He's just someone you want to be around and learn from. So first and foremost, thank you so much for being here, Glen.
Well, it's always great to be with you. And again, thank you for being there in the early days of Livongo and putting us on air and telling our stories. So you've been incredible.
It was awesome. And I even did a quick flashback and looked at some of those early interviews, and it's really, truly that evolution and growth that you've accomplished over that time frame is amazing. So we're going to cover some of that today. I'm going to start with at the beginning of Livongo. You founded Livongo in 2014. What was the original vision for the company?
Well, let's see. The original vision, there were really two different driving factors. One, and you've heard me tell this story before, my youngest son, Sam, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when he was 8 years old. And that introduced me to this chronic condition called diabetes. And Sam, fortunately, today he's 26, he's doing well. But when he was diagnosed, I made a commitment to him to help find a cure and keep people healthy until we did. And what I found, the more I started to know what it was like to have diabetes, to be the father of someone with diabetes, to be the friend of someone with diabetes, I understood how hard we made it for people with diabetes and other chronic conditions to stay healthy. And I just knew we could make it easier to stay healthy. And all of the hurdles that we put in front of people, especially people who are under-resourced, they just didn't feel right. So there came an opportunity where I was able to actually jump in, and my partners suggested I think they wanted to get rid of me. So they said, why don't you leave our venture firm and go actually do something productive, like solve this problem. So that was one piece of it, which was we knew it was a very personal experience. And then second, when you look at chronic conditions, there are 147 million Americans who have at least one chronic condition, 1 out of every 2 adults. And that's diabetes, it's hypertension, it's weight management, it's behavioral and mental health issues. And so this is an enormous market, and every one of us can tell a story of how today healthcare is more complex, more confusing, and more costly than ever before. It's not working. So we just knew there was a business opportunity as well. So it was doing something that was really important to make a difference, and with an enormous business opportunity. And that was the thinking behind it.
Right. Well, and those statistics are mind-blowing when you think about it. So, so I'm going to actually fast forward 5 short years later. Okay, mid 2019, you took the company public, which is literally like an undertaking in and of itself. What was the main driver behind that decision to take the company public?
Well, I think first of all, let's start off with the fact that you have to have a great company. You have to have a company that has consistent revenues that are recurring. Otherwise, you don't want to do it. But today, an IPO decision is really about 3 or 4 things. At least it was for us. One, it's a branding event. Going public puts you on the national agenda and the international agenda when you go public on NASDAQ. So first and foremost, it's a branding event. Second, we were creating a new category. We were doing something that hadn't been done before. We were combining healthcare and the magic of Silicon Valley, kind of this tech-enabled healthcare. And so from that perspective, event. So first and foremost, a branding event. Second, it was a new category introduction. Third, our customers, which are the largest, the Fortune 500 and the like, they love transparency. If you're public, they can see how much money you have, that you're not going away, that you have $800 million in the bank. That's all good news for them. And then last but not least, it is a great source of capital. So it allowed us to do acquisitions using our stock. So all of those came into play, paired with the fact that we had this great recurring revenue business that was growing in excess of 100%. So it felt to me like, for all those reasons, it was the right time to do it.
Yeah, having a great growth story is really important when you go public.
Yes,
because you have to. You're on stage every quarter.
Well,
actually,
you are
every day.
Yeah, you are, and basically, we were fortunate to be able to, in each quarter that we've been public, to actually beat and raise our numbers. So again, the story of what we created at Livongo was quite extraordinary. And it was all based on the fact that our members, the people we serve, don't just like what we do, they actually love it. And when you get that kind of experience and you can create a new experience, particularly in healthcare, you can do extraordinary things.
For sure. So I'm going to now fast forward again.
Okay.
There's a lot to talk about, but fast forward again to a year later, right here, we're in it. And so just a few weeks ago, uh, you announced an $18.5 billion merger with Teladoc Health. So what is your vision then for the combined companies?
Well, let me say two things. It's been quite an extraordinary year. We did the IPO, then we did a secondary offering, then we did a convertible to raise just under $600 million, and then we announced the merger. So in 12 months, it's been kind of one thing to the next while we were running a company that was growing very quickly. And a lot of people ask the same question you did with a little bit of an edge, and that is, with everything going so well, why merge now? And the idea was we saw an opportunity to create the first truly global consumer-centric virtual care company. Mm-hmm. And as we looked at it, we said, right now we're solving part of the challenge. And that is for people with chronic conditions, we were available 24/7. That's important. We were incredibly responsive. We made it easier for them to stay healthy. All those things were really good. And that's what all of our great internet companies and SaaS companies do. Mm-hmm. And that's why we were valued so highly, because people saw us using information the way that other internet companies did. Google's available 24/7. It gets smarter all the time. We have 750 million pieces of data that we're using to make it better. So we know how to keep you healthier. So all of that was great. But people would call us in the middle of the night and they'd say, I have a sinus infection. And we'd say, well, why are you calling us? And they'd say, well, number one, you're the only people who answer the phone in the middle of the night. Two, you're the only people who we trust. And three, you're the only people who actually care about solving the problem. So we said, well, how do we solve that problem? Telehealth. So we knew we needed telehealth capability. On the flip side, Teladoc, which was the clear leader in virtual care, they'll do about 10 million visits this year. They looked at it and they said, people who are calling, a lot of people who call us don't just call for sinus infection. They call because they have a chronic condition. And boy, wouldn't it be great if we could help them with their chronic condition and do it so they don't have multiple pieces of software, multiple applications, multiple coaches. Wouldn't it be great if we could create one place to go to get an incredible experience of healthcare, which we've never had anywhere in the US anyway. And so as we talked, we saw, wow, this is amazing. You're international. We'd like to be international. You're already in 50 countries. There's only 25% overlap of our customer base. What an expansion opportunity. And then we looked at it and we said, there's no product overlap. Everything we do, you don't have. Everything you do, we don't have. And now we stretch from the hospital with their InTouch product to coming to home, all the way home to our digital front door. And so we've covered the whole base, and we've done that very comprehensively. So it was an unbelievable fit. I've never seen a fit, and I've done a lot of acquisitions, a lot of mergers, never seen a fit this
yeah,
good.
It's perfect. It is. It just feels like it's so perfect. But striking a deal of this magnitude during a global pandemic, like, first of all, is far from typical, okay, let alone just striking a deal like this. But talk about the process that you went through, during the pandemic. I mean, there is a process you go through when you merge companies. But how did you pull that off during the pandemic? You couldn't, sit down and meet for as many meetings and flights people normally take. What did you do? How did you do it?
Well, a lot of late night Zoom calls, a lot of conversations. But I have to say the industrial logic really drove this. And that is, as Jason Gorovic, the CEO of Teladoc, and I looked at each other and our teams were together, we said, this just fits. And we started to understand what we could create. And, my vision has always been, how do we help not just 100,000 people or 1 million people? We're doing that today. But how do we help millions of people? Teladoc, there's 70 million people who have access to Teladoc today. Imagine if we could give all of those people access to what we have. Imagine if we could make healthcare truly better experience, improve health, and reduce costs. And we saw that vision to be the ability to create this global entity, which is just under $40 billion, and actually change healthcare. So that's how it happened. And then we did have some socially distanced, some socially distanced meetings. And we had to find a place where everybody could fly to and no one violated any of the shelter in place or any of those. So we ended up having one or two meetings where we were able to get together and we said, this just makes sense. So, but it was all driven by what people wanted, starting with our members. They wanted one integrated experience. And our clients who said, we can't deal, especially in the time of the pandemic, we can't deal with 4 or 5 or 6 companies. And, when we announced it, the market was, well, we're not sure about this. The stock bounced around. But our clients, they were like, this is perfect. Our members, thank you, thank you, thank you. And so that's how we knew, that's where we live every day. And we knew that this made sense. So that's why we did it.
Feedback from customers is so incredibly valuable. I mean, if you don't have that access, like if customers don't have that access to you, you sort of really lose the value of the voice of the customer. But so I think that's awesome. But I actually want to talk about your product then for a minute, because when you look at the pandemic, I'm really curious how a lot of your customers utilized your platform and medical devices differently during this time.
Well, remember that during the pandemic, people couldn't go to the hospital or to the ER, or even to their physician's office. And, what we all learned together was that, in fact, if you have a chronic condition, it's actually dangerous to go to a place where people might be going because they have coronavirus. People with chronic conditions are not more likely to get coronavirus, but if they get it, they're much more likely to have a negative outcome. In fact, 78% of all of the ICU admissions were people with pre-existing or chronic conditions, and 90% of all of the deaths had to do with people with chronic conditions. So we had to keep them safe at home and out of harm's way. And fortunately, all of our products, you've heard about the acceleration in telehealth. That happened, and it was similar for Livongo. So telehealth and teledoc in particular was already rapidly growing. Livongo was already rapidly growing. But what this did was accelerate that growth probably by 4 years. And so literally
4 years.
We saw the market develop in a way that would have taken years. I mean, if you think about the penetration of telehealth was between 3 and 8%. Mm-hmm. And it went to 100% overnight. Mm-hmm. So how long would that have taken? And then now it's going to settle in, and we think it'll be in the high 40s potentially. Yeah. And similarly, for our services, the ability to provide people care anywhere in the world, 24 hours a day, and help them stay healthier and put them back in charge. At Livongo, we talk about empowering people with chronic conditions to live better and healthier lives. And so we're not taking charge, we're putting them back in charge, giving them technology to do that. So, so again, that's I think that was really what drove it.
Sure, totally makes sense. So, but you talk about the pandemic has accelerated this, and that it take 4 years. That just is also mind blowing to me. But when you look at this, do you think that it wasn't moving forward prior to the pandemic because of the customer or because of the industry? Like, which one was sort of holding it up?
Well, it was, so first of all, it's always a little bit of both, but it was primarily payment structures. And that is, there was no good way for physicians primarily to get reimbursed. If you called your physician and she answered and you talked to her, there was no way she could bill for that. And yet, why did you need to drive in when you may have had a quick question? And frankly, it was higher quality care, more convenient, and may have actually saved a lot of money by doing that. But there was no reimbursement mechanism. So that was addressed, and we hope it stays addressed. I think there's now legislation to make it more permanent. So we had to change the payment structure. And then secondarily, there were a lot of people who had never used telehealth, just like a lot of people had never used Zoom. A lot of people had never had their groceries delivered at home from Amazon. We hadn't done, and we're still learning to do education digitally. So all of these areas will be advanced dramatically because of this. And we just happen to be in the most important, which is how healthy all of us are.
Yeah, right. Health comes first. So what does this mean for the healthcare industry moving forward? And you just started to allude to it, like sort of the balancing out, right? But do you expect like an even greater shift to virtual, or is it going to sort of, revert back to some balance in between?
Well, I think though it will be a shift, a dramatic shift to virtual, but that will allow us to provide better care because all of us understand that, first of all, virtual or digital creates abundance. So we can now provide the same level of care on an Indian reservation, in an inner city area, in a rural area that might not be able to see an endocrinologist or a behavioral health specialist. We can now do that. We can do it 24/7. And we all know that's what we want. Healthcare doesn't happen between 8 and 5 except during lunch. And yet that's how we manage healthcare today. So we're going to make healthcare available 24/7. When you go on Google, one of the things we love, or Amazon, is you're in charge. You decide when you want to order something. You decide where it's going to be shipped to. You decide how quickly you want it. In healthcare, it's exactly the opposite. So we're going to flip that model. We're going to put the consumer back in charge and let her or let him make those decisions. The other side of that is, if you think about it, we also learned we have to protect our physicians, both their health and their time. And so we should use them more wisely. With Livongo, we can actually help physicians identify in a population, here's the 5 people who really need your attention. And the people who normally are compliant and come to see you, they're compliant already. They probably don't need to see you. They don't need a checkup. We can do that remotely. Let's deal with folks who really need your attention and care and not try to fit them in a 5-minute appointment, but let's spend the time with those folks in a different way. So we think this is an opportunity to totally redefine how we do health and care. And they're different. It's not healthcare, it's health and care.
Yeah.
And we can use this to make both better and to pay our physicians more and to reduce the cost of healthcare.
Yeah,
so
it's like a win-win-win. It's a win-win across the board for everybody. It really is.
It is.
And so I'm going to ask this question, but you've kind of answered it already, but it's a little bit of a different twist on it. Because before the Teladoc deal, Livongo's valuation grew more than 400%, right, in 2020. And I get a big part of that is due to the pandemic, but in fairness, like part of this is due to the product that you've built and the trajectory. And I know you said 4 years, it's sort of accelerated it. But why merge when you're the leader in this space? And I get that it was sort of a plug and play, right? But you could have potentially grown and become that too. So just sort of tie that into both.
I attribute most of the growth to being on your show. Most of the growth in our stock.
Perfect answer.
But and I actually don't attribute a lot of that to coronavirus, in the sense of we weren't as driven by that as we were driven by the fact that quarter after quarter we kept meeting and exceeding the numbers, and people understood that this was going to happen independently. So, I think we were the fastest growing consumer digital health company ever. And from that standpoint, and second, this was all recurring. So we have more than 97%, I think is the number, client retention, and better than 90% member retention for people who stay with the same employer. So the metrics were what was driving the growth, but it was helped, there's no question it was helped by the fact that people were now paying attention to what digital tools can we use. But why did we do the merger? Again, it was really this idea that both organizations knew Jason and I looked at each other and we said, we're either going to be competitors or we're going to put the two leaders together. And when you have an opportunity to create something that you know is going to outlast you, that you know has the real opportunity to change healthcare, not just in America, around the world, I mean, that's a once in a lifetime opportunity. And so we decided to take it, and we just knew together we could do what our clients were asking for. His clients were asking for it. My clients were asking for it. We knew that the members, and these are the people we care about, those are the people like my son, like all of the people we work with. So many of them, they have family members impacted. And when you understood what we could provide, then, this became both for us and for our boards, everyone seemed to understand it. Now the market's understanding it.
For sure. And it just all made sense. And I'll tell you, it's exciting when you have a conversation like that because everything just kind of clicks. So for many people watching, they have never been involved in a multi-billion-dollar merger. Okay, so I want to actually give the viewers, if I can, some relatable takeaways or advice from you. And I'll try to run through these quickly because I know we could run out of time because I have so many questions. But I'm going to try to run through these and just sort of get your take on it. So when you first started your entrepreneurial career, were there any steps that you took that really turned out to be a waste of time? It was sort of more of a learning opportunity.
Well, I think that one, move quickly, try a lot of things, and keep learning is the answer. So a lot of people ask me, maybe in a nice way, you were saying, tell me about your failures. And I've never really looked at them. I've looked at them as everyone, as long as I learned what not to do, and as long as I did it quickly and figured out this isn't working, let's try something else. I think the biggest suggestion I would have there is don't get tied up, because if it's your idea and then you want to double down, and that's the biggest mistake executives make. And, our people make fun of the fact that I will adopt whatever idea. I can come into a meeting and I have my idea and I leave that meeting and my idea became their idea because it was whatever idea was best. I'm happy to embrace it. We just want to win. We just want to get to the best idea. So I think you got to check your ego at the door and just say, let's get to the answer. It doesn't matter whose it is. And the flip side of that is it doesn't matter if you make a mistake. We've had lots of people. I've made lots of mistakes. Move on. Don't focus on what happened. Just move on. I don't believe in celebrating, let's celebrate failure. I don't think so. But let's also not vilify somebody if they did all the right things and something didn't work. Let's just keep moving. Let's just keep moving forward.
I love that. And I actually say it all the time too. Checking your ego at the door is so vitally important because it's such a negative, it reverberates, right? And it does. Yeah. So I love that. So conversely then, what were the things you did that greatly helped you build any of the companies? It could almost be the same answer, doing a lot of different things quickly, right? But what would that answer be for you?
I think number one, it's starting with great people. You have to have people who are great. You have to treat them right. We have kind of a continuum. We start with our members, and then we go to our clients, and then we go to our people, and then we go to the community. Giving back, really important to us, because people who give back are people we want to work with. And then we go to our investors. And sometimes our investors say, well, why are we last on the list? And it's kind of like, if you get them in order correct, you'll do well. And so that's number one. Number two, we wanted to share the opportunity. So everyone at Livongo had stock. Everyone did extremely well because of that. They worked really hard. They deserve everything they had. But we are very focused on making sure we're all on a level playing field in terms of everybody in the company contributing. And when we did the IPO, I was very proud that we took every employee who was at the company in the first 2 years, whether you were a secretary or whether you were the data person or office manager. If you were there in the first 2 years, you got to go to NASDAQ and ring, press the button. That's what, and we did that. And we had some people who, stayed back at our various offices, and we just said, listen, that's what we're doing. They were here at the beginning. So I think building a culture that really drives for member first, our members, our customers, we call them members, and really puts them first. And then a real commitment, which is what we're doing is so important. I mean, we are changing lives. That's why we work in healthcare. And you can't, the passion that comes with that, the energy. And one last thing, and that is having fun. So we take having fun very seriously. And if you're going to commit, you're going to put this much energy into the business, then you also have to have fun doing it. You have to have great people around. We had, again, at Livongo, we had the largest ride team for JDRF in the country. When you go on a walk, that's one thing. When you contribute, when you ride 100 miles, these are people who are committed. And we had some people, and they were it was a beautiful thing to see their commitment and their passion for a cause. And we see that all over the company. So getting that, awesome. It's something really special.
Yeah. Connecting in another way with your employees, I think, is important, and shared vision on helping a community like that. Yeah. So I have to ask, when you first started Livongo, you were already a very experienced entrepreneur. Did you have a roadmap, a business plan, like entrepreneurs have when they first start? It never turns out like they plan initially. But did you have sort of that short-term and long-term plan? Or did you honestly you wanted to get through the first year to see if there was customer adoption and all of that?
Well, first of all, it's terrifying, okay, to start any new business. And particularly when people say, you've had such a good career, why would you put it all on the line to start over? And it's starting over. You don't get, I always joke that you ended the Four Seasons, but you started Holiday Inn. You got to be prepared to start over again. And so from that standpoint, what we had this vision. It hasn't changed. And it wasn't about diabetes. From day one, it was, how do we empower people with chronic conditions to live better and healthier lives? And those words were important. We didn't want to engage them. We didn't want to convince somebody. We wanted to give them something that was so valuable, they wanted to use it. And it wasn't about diabetics, a word we hate. We hate calling people by their disease. These are people, and all of us have an issue. We all have something. And so we wanted to take people who had a challenge, and until we find the cure, make it easier for them to stay healthy. And we wanted to focus on chronic conditions because we know that so many of them go together. If you have type 2 diabetes, 70% of those people have hypertension as well. Mm-hmm. So we knew that just solving one little piece of that puzzle wasn't going to be enough. So we were incredibly focused, and, we just put our heads down and we worked really, really hard. We had an amazing group of people, and it worked out. Yeah. But I think it worked out because we cared more than anybody else. And people were amazed how much it mattered to us to get it right. And also, so many of our people, almost a third of our people, had either had diabetes or had a family member who did. So this was intensely personal. It was passionate, and we had to get it right. This wasn't some product somewhere. This was like quality control. Mm-hmm. I'd go home and I'd look at my son, and I knew what quality control meant. So,
right.
It was just an amazing, passionate endeavor that we had. And that's what's great. And that's what makes businesses so successful.
Yeah, I agree. And that passion just shows through, right? I mean, and when you use the product yourself, it is when you are the customer in some way, shape, or form, whether it's your son or whoever it may be that or if you're using it yourself, it is so incredible how that can help catapult your company forward, right? Yeah. Because you're just so in tune to everything going on. So I have to ask the question about raising money, because you did raise a lot of money, even prior to going public, right? And you manage it, you're a managing partner of a VC fund, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But, raising a lot of money in those first 5 years would you say there's a rule of thumb? Like, what would be your rule of thumb about how much operating capital you need, before you launch? And that's a really hard question because it depends on what industry you're in. But sort of curious what your rule of thumb is.
Well, I'd say long ago we were in a business and we had just done an IPO, and those were the days. IPOs have become a little bit easier than they used to be. Maybe that's having done a few. They give you a little bit of a break, but I was fairly exhausted from being on the road for a few weeks doing this IPO. We came back, and the first thing that happens is your investment bankers come in and say, "Let's do a secondary. Let's raise even more money." And so I asked my board about it, and we were going around, and there's a gentleman named Ted Phillip, and he said, "Glenn, have you ever been to a party?" "Yeah." And he said, "Where they were passing out hors d'oeuvres?" And so I said, "Yeah, of course." And he said, "Did you take one?" And I said, "Yeah, I took one." He said, "Why'd you take one?" I said, "Well, I didn't know when they were going to come by with the tray again." And so he said, "Right now they're passing out hors d'oeuvres, take one." And we've always looked at that and said, if there's an opportunity to raise capital and do so in a non-dilutive, efficient way, you ought to do that, because you never know when they're coming around again. When we were very fortunate when we did our IPO. If you remember, right after we did the IPO, the window slammed shut. And I've been at companies where our stock went from $89 to $2. And had we not had capital, we would have been out of business. Because we had capital, when the markets collapse, if you have capital, you can be very strategic. So I'm a big fan of raising capital. You have to balance that with dilution. But, that said, I'd rather take some dilution, vis-a-vis the security of having money in the bank. And the second thing is your customers want to know, especially big customers. At Livongo, we have more than a third of the Fortune 500. And they want to know, if they roll this out nationally to their base, that you're going to be around. So it helps to have capital. It helps to be public. It helps to have great venture partners, General Catalyst and Kinnevik, which is a big Swedish international firm that's been so supportive of us. And, folks like that who have been really helpful to us along the way.
Yeah. And we at tastytrade have always been firm believers as well of you raise capital when you can, not when you need to.
Right.
Because the dynamics change.
That's it. You got it perfectly right.
Yeah.
Because when you need to, it's like when you loan money from the bank. If you go into the bank and say, "I'm completely out of money, I'm desperate," the bank looks at you like you don't exist.
Right.
Whereas if you go when you have money, they're happy to loan you more.
Yes, yes, exactly. So, so you were CEO of Allscripts for 14 years and Livongo for 4 years, both highly successful. What attributes make a great CEO and why?
Again, I think it's one big piece of it is energy. When we're in industries where you change things. That's how you create value. If you come out with a new piece of software or a new product and it doesn't do anything different, then nobody's going to buy it. So it's all about changing industries. We were at Allscripts, we were able to change the way America writes prescriptions and make them electronic, and then do the same thing for practice management, and then on for electronic health records for smaller practices. And similarly at Livongo, we've been able to do that, and at many of the companies. So to do that requires an endless amount of energy, number one. Number two, the ability and the willingness to learn and change, really important, because you start off with an idea and it may not work. And you've got to pivot, and you've got to pivot very quickly. And that's this constant kind of curiosity that says, let's try this. And it's also a willingness to continue to innovate. And that's really hard, because so many companies, they say, this is the way we do it. And I've always said to people, no, that's just the way we made up like a year ago. Now we can make something else up. But you really have to, you can't get wed to where you are. Just like this merger, which is, hey, everything was great. Why'd you change? Because I'd rather change than have somebody change it for me.
Right.
And so from
Sometimes you
that
have to disrupt
standpoint,
yourself.
exactly.
Disrupt
I mean, I
yourself.
think that is exactly what happens. And in this constant learning, and then last but not least, a real focus on people. We are so blessed with the team that we had at Livongo, that we have at Livongo, the leadership team. But it's not just a few of the top folks. It's how they treat the people below them. It's investing in everybody, and making everybody feel like they're a part of the solution. And so it's really, it's about the people.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's a combination, but I think that's it. It's the leaders who really connect with people, I think, is really important. And it's also the ability. That doesn't mean being nice, it means being respected. So sometimes you have to call out people to say, look, I'm here to help you, but sometimes I got to give you really tough news. And that's about how you got to get better if you want to stay.
For sure. I think you're spot on. So I'm going to try to squeeze in 2 more questions before we open it up for questions. Okay. So
good.
This question is sort of near and dear to me. But Livongo has a significant presence in Chicago. What makes Chicago an attractive city to build a business?
Well, I think there's a number of things. One, Midwest values, great people in Chicago, a lot of universities. It's a reasonably affordable city to live in. I love Chicago. I love the fact that I can bike, run, swim all in the same day. None of which I do well, but all of which I enjoy doing. And so I think it's a great, city to be in. And that said, we have facilities in other places. In Silicon Valley, I went there and we started this business there in part because I wanted that consumer-centric, consumer-first mentality that had made so many other businesses successful everywhere but healthcare. I wanted to blend those together. So we had amazingly talented people, but it's very, very expensive to build a business there. To hire young engineers and folks who are trying to start a family, super, super expensive. Right. So we had the best of both worlds. We were able to have lots of folks in Chicago, lots of folks in Silicon Valley. Then through an acquisition, we opened a Denver office. We're expanding in Denver. And then we have a lot of people who work remotely, even before the pandemic. So there's a lot of great places to build a business, but I've always been partial to Chicago.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Chicago. The other thing I'll point out too is Chicago's like the number 2, highest concentration of computer science grads, right? So companies like Livongo, you can actually keep that talent here. But also too, places like mHUB and 1871 and just like this amazing Midwest mindset of helping you. And those types of structures and organizations also really help catapult the whole startup industry, right? So
Midwest nice.
Midwest nice. I totally agree. Okay, last question, and then we'll open it up. So you're also managing partner of a venture capital fund, 7 Wire Ventures. What trends are you seeing in your portfolio or even with other early stage companies?
Well, we were very fortunate. So, and you heard it mentioned in the introduction, our investment thesis is the informed, connected health consumer. So informed, we want to make people smarter. We invest with businesses that make people smarter about their health, that make them more connected, not just connected to the internet, but the internet connected to them, like remote monitoring. So informed, connected health, focus not on healthcare, but on keeping people healthy and outside of the healthcare system. And lastly, treat them not as patients who get treated very poorly, actually, but as consumers. So all of our investments are in that. So let me give you an example of 1 or 2. So we have one business called Recovery One. So they do physical therapy, but they do it remotely. Well, when everything shut down and you couldn't go and you had knee surgery and you couldn't go to your physical therapist in a big room, you didn't want to and they weren't open, everybody migrated to this digital service. And, that's booming. And I could go on and on. We have business called Home Thrive, which is really exciting. It's allowing people to stay at home and thrive at home. So if you have an elderly parent, and what do they need? Well, they need services. They need a, kind of a concierge, a valet. So we provide that to say, oh, do they need a ride somewhere? Do they need groceries delivered? All those things to allow people to stay at home. Well, that became even more important when the pandemic hit because nobody wanted to be in these homes, and people were pulling their parents out of these homes.
Mhm.
But the question is, if they had jobs, they couldn't be there 24/7 to care for them. So each of our services has a consumer digital health spin, and that's why the fund has been, tremendously successful. We've been very fortunate. We'll have returned in year 2 more than 100% of the total invested amount, and we still own 11 companies. So it's it's been a real home run for our investors, and we're proud of that.
For sure. That's amazing. So Glen, I don't know what other world problems you're going to solve next. All I know is that I want to be a part of them. Okay.
Good. You're welcome. You're welcome. Anytime.
So I am going to turn this over to Melissa to open it up for a question. So thanks so much, Glen.
Thanks, Kristi.
Everybody, I'm Shannon McGee. I'm the Director of Marketing. First, I want to say thank you to Glen and Kristi for this wonderful discussion. We have seen some amazing questions come through the Q&A box, but then also email. So keep them coming. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will see an option for Q&A. Ask the questions. We have about 10 more minutes. I will jump right in. From an anonymous attendee, for both Kristi and Glen, as veterans in the Chicago tech ecosystem, how have you seen the ecosystem in Chicago grow and change over the past 10 years? And why is it a good place to build a business?
That's awesome.
Go ahead.
You want me to go first? I'll go first. Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to say, I've been around here for a long time, like 3 decades. And it is amazing what has happened just in the last decade. And that's when you saw 1871 coming up and mHUB and the community really coming together and focusing on what are those pillars for a successful interaction, right? And a true ecosystem. And listen, that starts with leadership. And that started with, buy-in from the mayor. It started with someone like J.B. Pritzker stepping up and saying, I'm going to help with this. And you, of course, need, the large companies and the startups and everybody willing to come together, as well as having sort of a meeting place. That matters, right? That sort of that physical community. And so we saw that really over this past decade. And I saw what it was like before, and it felt like silos. And when you have everybody willing to sort of come in and contribute, I think that's where all of a sudden the magic happens. But it does start with leadership. It does, and a lot of times that leadership is within the community. So Glen had touched on a lot of the reasons why Chicago is a great place. So I won't go through all of them again. But affordability for sure, and the Midwest mindset, and it is a great place to be for families as well, raising a family, and of course all the universities. But Glen, now I'll turn it over to you now that I've named basically a lot of the things.
Well, first of all, I just want to call out for healthcare in particular, Matter, which is terrific, and they've been a great innovation source. I think the other thing I'd say is traditionally having O'Hare was Chicago is the midpoint. So if you're on either coast, it's a little tougher. Chicago is a great midpoint to connect people with, and we're going to get back there. It's going to take a little longer, but we are going to, I think, get back to the fact that we still have to meet with people. We're social animals, and then I go back. And the only thing I think we have to do more of is we have to get more venture investment in Chicago. It is still easier to walk in someplace and get $1 million in Silicon Valley for a new idea than it is in Chicago. And all of the wonderful things, there is some Midwest conservatism, and I'd love to see that open up just a bit more. But we're starting to see it, and there's a great community here. And, I think we're going to see a lot more of it going forward.
Great. Thank you. This question's from email, close to our heart here at mHUB, from an mHUB member. I know Livongo is inherently a software company, but there's also a hard tech component. Since a lot of us are hardware or product entrepreneurs, how do you think of hardware innovation, and how can it drive impact for Livongo's future role?
Well, I think as those people who know Livongo, you know that hardware is core to all the services we provide. But I think any time that you have people talking about hardware or technology, you're actually losing. What you want is you want a situation where people say, it just happened. Like nobody talks about the chipset in their phone. They just use their phone. So we want when people step on a connected scale, transmits their weight, eventually it'll give them feedback. Because they step on their scale in the morning, it might tell them the weather and it might tell them all kinds of things they need to know. When they check their blood sugar, they don't have to Bluetooth it or anything else. We have sophisticated systems in that little device that actually do all that for them and give them real-time personalized suggestions. So ton of data science behind it, a ton of technology behind it. But the idea is you got to make the experience really simple for the end user. And that's the way we think about it. There's a great quote that says, technology perfectly applied is indistinguishable from magic. And I love that quote. And, the other thing I'll give my older son some credit. He was playing a role-playing game once. And I went downstairs and he was playing this game. And I decided I wanted to be a good dad. So I said, I'm going to learn this game. And I said to him, hey, where are the directions? I want to learn the game. And he looked up at me and he said something, I never forget it. And he said, Dad, nothing smart has directions anymore. And it was really pretty amazing because what he was saying is you just start using stuff and it should be so intuitive that you don't have to read something and how to use it. That's a failure. So we've tried to use that in a lot of what we do. We don't do any training for any of the stuff we send out. We send it out, and if people can't figure out how to use it, we fail. So that's the way I think about technology. Like we'll call somebody in the middle of the night, their blood sugar is dangerously low or dangerously high, and they'll say things like, you called at the perfect moment. And it's like, yeah, because it was blinking on our screen. But we don't say that. We say, what do you need right now? That's what that's technology enabled. And so that's the way we want to use it. So my answer is like the technology is critical, but it's not for technologies. Use the technology to solve a problem. Say, what do people not like today? And how can we use technology to make it disappear? That's really the magic of technology.
That's awesome. And I'm going to use that quote from your son, by the way.
Good, you can.
Great. Here's a question from Carrie Jordan. Please share your views on how to bring more people of color into entrepreneurship and capital raising. How do we increase diversity in Chicago's tech ecosystem?
Wow, that's a great one because, first of all, we are very committed in every city at Livongo that we operate in. We used to fund 3 things, and now we fund 4. One, a food pantry. So Chicago Food Depository here, but in every area. 2, a homeless shelter. 3, a battered women's shelter. And now 4, an organization that focuses on improving both racial diversity and inclusion. We've also made a commitment. We're investing some of our funds in Black-owned banks. I think that may have already been done, but our directive was to not talk about it, but to do it. And we have an amazing director of diversity and inclusion who's pushing this. We have goals to, in terms of our own hiring, we measure that. It's one of our reportable metrics that we report to the company. So it's critically important both for women, and we're doing a ton in Silicon Valley. Women haven't had the as much representation as I felt was right. And so we lead a women's empowerment initiative. We have a big initiative called She Powers Health to recognize women leaders. Our president of Livongo is a woman. We are very, very focused on it. So as with many things, I think business has to step up and take an active role in promoting this. And, it is critically important. Again, we're fortunate to have a number of initiatives and, for us, it's about action. We've got to stop talking about things and start acting to make a difference. And we have to be very proactive. And that's, I think, reflected in the long overdue focus on racial disparities in our country. It's wrong. Business has to step up and take a position. We can't do this. Well, we're in business. That doesn't work anymore. Business has to get active in communities, in these issues. And by the way, people love it when you do. And, but that's has to, for us to be successful as a country. The other thing I'd say is we do diversity across our business simply because it makes us better. It makes us a better business. How can I run a business in healthcare when women make 80% of all healthcare decisions without being surrounded by women? And I got in a little trouble when we were hiring our amazing chief marketing officer. And I said, I will only hire a woman for that role. And people were like on me about it. Well, how is that fair? I said, it's fair because guess what? That's who's, I want that perspective. And, that is the same across the business. So we're very passionate about being actively, moving the ball forward here. And we have to do it. And every business ought to be judged that way. Every single business, every single CEO, we ought to be asking them, what are you doing in these areas? Not what are you saying, not what new program, what action? So, that's what we're very, very focused on.
I don't think I could have said it better than Glen. I mean, it really is about taking action and not just talking about it. But having that diversity of thought is so important in every aspect of business. And it should be everyone. It's not even just the CEO, although the CEO sets a good example, but it's everybody in the company. And you have to actually create that culture throughout your company so that everybody is sort of open and welcoming and always looking to, help improve and diversify as a whole. So,
and I'll say one other thing. One of our initiatives is, this isn't about giving somebody something; it's about enabling things. So we have an initiative that says we want to. Our first initiative was, well, let's double the amount of services and products that we buy from Black and African American owned businesses. And, that sounded good. And then I looked at what we were buying and it's like, that's a ridiculous number. That's tiny. Like, no. We have to take a percentage of our overall spend and shift that. And if we can't find the businesses, let's help create the businesses to do this. Because
I love that.
That's what, and that was the task that we said. And again, we're measuring it, we're reporting it to the whole company, so we can't hide it. And either we're going to make progress. And again, we've already made with Chicago, we're already making investments. I'm very proud with, John Rogers and Melody Hobson. We've already inked agreements with them, all based on got to do something right away. And, that's what we want to do. But it's the best thing to do for the business. That's what I say. And yeah, there's a good social reason as well. But we can keep it really easy and make everybody happy by saying this is best for our shareholders all day long.
Yeah. Absolutely. Right. Entrepreneurship is about solving problems. If you don't experience the problem, you don't have a diversity of team, you're not understanding all the problems you need to solve. Right?
That's right. That's right.
Great. So perhaps two questions. A quick fun one. I'm going to lump two together and then one more, and we'll go ahead and close it out. I know it's dinner time for everybody, both you two and then also our attendees. Two questions which may be related I've seen in here. I'll ask it at the voice of the attendee from an anonymous attendee. Glen, you and your brother, so successful. What did you eat power pills for breakfast? But then also, to whom or what do you attribute your outstanding people skills?
Outstanding what skills?
People skills.
Oh, well, so first of all, I'm fortunate. I'm from a family of 6. And so I have many, 3 different successful brothers. I think I know who you're talking about, but I have 3 and they're all successful in different ways. And I have 2 amazing sisters as well. So All of that came, I think, mainly from my mom, who was never said no and allowed all kinds of crazy things to go on in the house. But I will say that this is kind of a legendary story. There were pictures of all 6 of the kids. Kristi, I think, has heard this story, but there are pictures of all 6 of the kids when you walked in, and people would say, oh, look at all 6 of the kids. But if you did something wrong, she would turn a picture around and it would stay turned around, and people would come in and say, why is that picture turned around? And for like as long until somebody else did something, that story kept getting told. And it was like, so it was tough. And, there were many days that Howard, some people might think he's nice, but he stole my food. This is a competitive thing. There were 6 kids. And so, but it was a very competitive family. But my mother was incredibly creative. She was incredibly permissive. She let us do things. We talked about having a solar business, but way back when I was, I'm not sure how old I was, she let me cut a hole in our roof of our house, climb up on the roof and try to build a solar thing. And for as long as we lived there, the roof leaked from that point on. This was like a real house. And like, who lets their kids do that when they're like, I think I was like 13. I was on the roof with a saw cutting, like, and I can't even imagine what the neighbors thought. But, I did that. And then 30 years later, I tried it again at a little larger scale. And it ended up with a great Chicago entrepreneur, Pete Cadens. We ended up building a great company together, which we sold to Southern California Edison.
That is an awesome.
It was all, there's nothing like an incredible mom. So
that's cool. If I can just jump in there. I talked to Howard yesterday and he told me to say something to you. And I said, I can't say that on air. I'll tell you after.
But you can now tell him that I talked about him stealing food from me when I was little. And, that's, so there we go.
A lo-fi prototype at its best. So I think that is actually a great place to end. I know we're a little bit over. So there have been a number of really great questions, really business-centered questions, perspectives from early stage entrepreneurs. So don't worry, to those of you on the line who didn't get your questions answered, we will follow up with you and we will work to get those answered. But I want to thank Glen and Kristi for your time today, for this amazing discussion. It's been so great to have this virtually, even though we couldn't have it in person, maybe next year. But thank you to all who joined in this moment of the Summer Speaker Series. Our next event will be September 17th, where we'll be talking about investment trends in hard tech, good follow-up from this conversation, and why now is the time to invest. So thank you to everybody. Have a great night. Stay safe, and we'll see you on the line.
Thanks.
Shannon.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.